Good afternoon. Again, my name is Becky Robinson, and I'm here today with Bill Treasurer and Marshall Goldsmith for a very special event celebrating the launch of Bill Treasurer's new book, A Leadership Kick in the Ass. Today's event is Leadership and the Power of Being Humble. Hey, Marshall's got the book too. Marshall, welcome. Bill, welcome.
Thank
Hello.
you.
So today, as we get started, I have a few important announcements and some information that you might need to get the most out of today's event. The first thing I want to let you know is that today's event is a little different. We're not going to have slides that are going to continue to advance, so please don't ask. We're not going to move the slides too much today until the end when we have a very special offer for you, but instead we want to invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation that these two leadership giants are going to have with one another. And later toward the end of the broadcast, we're going to be accepting your questions live, and I'm going to be sharing those. And so I want you to take a moment to get acquainted with the question panel. And as we always love to do, you can start by telling us where you're calling in from today. I'm imagining that we are going to have an international audience, and so if you can just take a quick moment to give a shout out to your location. And Marshall, tell me again where you're calling in from today.
I'm in Rancho Santa Fe, California, just north of San Diego.
And Bill, where are you today? Bill?
Well, as you know, I live in Asheville, North Carolina, but today I'm up at Beech Mountain, which is near Boone, North Carolina.
And I'm noticing that we have callers from across the U.S., and we have Edmonton, Alberta, and Ontario, Canada, South Carolina, Oregon, Florida, Georgia. Oh my goodness, lots of California callers, Alabama, Michigan, Pittsburgh. Our friends at Barrett Kohler Publishers are saying hello from Berkeley, California. I'm seeing people, we have a caller in from London, Vancouver, British Columbia, just about every state that you might imagine. We have a caller from India. So thanks to all of you, and I hope that you'll continue to use that question panel. As you think of questions throughout the event, we would love to have you add those questions in the question panel. And as I said, toward the end of this broadcast, we'll get back and talk through some of those questions together. I'd also love to invite you to live tweet with us today. We're going to use the hashtag that I put in the chat. It's Leadership Kick, short for Leadership Kick in the you know where. So use that hashtag Leadership Kick. And I also put Bill's Twitter handle and Marshall's Twitter handle there for you in the chat so that you can give a shout out to them for the great ideas that they're going to be sharing. In case you're not able to stay for the whole hour, we will be recording this live event, and we will share the recording with you very soon after the event so that you can share it with your friends and colleagues who might be out for the Martin Luther King Day holiday. So all of those things, we'll be sharing some special resources, and we have a really incredible offer today that we're going to share with you at the end of the event. So I encourage you to stay on until the very end of the hour, if at all possible, so that you can hear about the great offer that Bill has for those of you who have chosen to join us today to celebrate the launch of this new and very special book. So I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce Bill Treasurer, because if you're like Bill, you believe that the world could use more good leaders. And we hope to learn something about that today. For over 2 decades, Bill and his company, Giant Leap Consulting, have worked with thousands of leaders across the globe, from renowned organizations such as NASA, CNN, Saks Fifth Avenue, UBS Bank, Lenovo, the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. But Bill doesn't consider himself a leadership expert. Instead, he considers himself a leadership plumber, because every day he works with leaders who might be trying to get rid of those hairballs that are mucking up their leadership pipes. And I got to tell you, it ain't always pretty. That's some kind of image there, Bill. So Bill is also the author of Leaders Open Doors, which became the top leadership training book in Amazon in the year 2014. And I had the honor of supporting Bill through that book launch as well. And notably, Bill donates all the proceeds of this book, Leaders Open Doors, to programs that support kids with special needs. And he's already donated $20,000 as a result of that book, Leaders Open Doors. Bill is also the author of the internationally best-selling book, Courage Goes to Work, and he introduced the new organizational development practice of courage building. And Bill's courageous leadership workshops are taught in 9 countries on 4 continents. So Bill's new book, as I mentioned before, A Leadership Kick in the Ass, launches today. And the book is about the importance and value of humility and redemption, and got top rousing endorsements from leadership luminaries like Marshall Goldsmith, who's on this call with us today, Ken Blanchard, Adam Grant, and Jim Kouzes. Bill's most joyful work is his work as husband to Shannon and father to his three children, Alex, Bina, and Ian, and he likes to call them his three heartbeats, which I find really sweet. So, Bill, we're so thrilled to have you today.
I couldn't be more thrilled to be here. Thank you so much, Becky. Thank you, Marshall. I'm so grateful for your willingness to do this webinar, and to all the people who showed up today, some 800 of us. I'm very grateful to be here. But tell us about Marshall, because people need to know that this is one of the world's best.
I am thrilled to. And, we were chatting. I know that when you call in early, and many of you do, that you can see us chatting with each other, but you can't hear us. And we were talking a little bit before this call about Marshall's 100 Coaches program, in which he's mentoring and giving back to coaches. It's tremendous. So in addition to that cool new program, Marshall has advised over 150 major CEOs and their management team. And he's the #1 New York Times bestselling author or editor of 35 books, including one that I have on my desk today called Triggers. And we did a webinar to support Triggers when it came out. Look, we all have each other's books today. He's also the author of What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and both were recognized by Amazon in their list of the 100 best leadership and success books ever written. Marshall has sold over 2 million copies of his books, and his work has been recognized by almost every publication and association in his field. Marshall gives all his thought leadership away at marshallgoldsmith.com and to the 525,000 people who follow him on LinkedIn. And his blogs, podcasts, and videos have been read, listened to, or viewed over 40 million times. Those are some incredible metrics from a name that's well known in this leadership development field. And with that, I'm going to turn my camera off, and I'm going to let these two gentlemen have a great conversation, and I'll be back with you at the end so that we can take the questions from the audience.
All right, terrific. Well, once again, thanks, Marshall. I really appreciate you being here, and let's have some fun.
Okay.
The first question, so I love Triggers. It's a really terrific book. It's essential reading for anybody who's in the leadership space, or if you care to be a better leader yourself. Triggers is just one of those foundational books that you really need to read as a leader. And one of the things that I found really interesting about the book is learning a little bit more about Marshall and his practice as a top executive coach to CEOs. And one of the things that is striking about Marshall's work is that he does not get paid unless the CEO makes the changes that are positive in his or her life, not based on the CEO's opinion of that, but based on the stakeholders' opinions that, yes, in fact, these changes have taken place. So my first question to you, Marshall, is what is the role that stakeholders play in supporting the changes, in advancing the changes, in being a reinforcement system for the person who might want to make leadership changes? And how can a leader enlist them in that process?
Well, our coaching process is called stakeholder-centered coaching. We have certified over 2,000 people in this process, and tens of thousands of people around the world have used it. So the stakeholder is the key. When I coach people, I tell them I'm a facilitator more than an expert. I don't get paid because I'm a good coach. I get paid because you're a great client. And most of what you learn, you do not learn from me. You learn from your stakeholders. And my coaching process really builds on a concept that you talk about in your book, humility. Because in my coaching process, the leaders have to get confidential feedback. They have to pick important behavior to improve. They have to talk to people about what they've learned, apologize for their previous mistakes, involve those key stakeholders on a regular basis, learn from these people, follow up on a regular basis, and then they get better and I get paid. So the stakeholders are really the whole show much more than I am, and they have to have the courage to look in the mirror. And then they have to have the discipline to do the hard work. But back to this conversation, they have to have the humility to admit they can improve. You know, Bill, I've learned something. It's very difficult to change anyone who's perfect. And, if someone is perfect, then there's not a whole lot I can do to help them get better because people who are perfect cannot get better. So humility is a key part of my whole coaching process.
Hmm. You know, that brings up for me is this, I heard this acronym once and it's always stuck with me, that a person in order for a person to be able to make dramatic behavioral changes in their life, they have to be who. And the acronym stands for willing, they've got to be honest, and they've got to be open. They've got to be willing to make the changes. They've got to be honest about what's going on for them and the reality of their situation in life. And then they got to be open to the feedback and input, willing to make those changes. So it kind of reminds me of what you just said there.
Well, you know,
Which,
a key thing is vulnerability, which is related to humility. They have to be vulnerable. I just had the privilege to listen to a good friend of mine, Dr. Laura Cully, talk, and she was talking about the concept of vulnerability with people who have health problems. And I was amazed how parallel the process is. They have to get the honest feedback about how they're doing, then really recruit people to help them get through this process, learn as much as they can, and then really plan for what am I going to do about it. So it's amazing. These processes apply not just in leadership, they also apply in life. Now, one thing about your book I love is you get these great expressions, and they're a lot of fun. I like your book because it has a good sense of humor. It's not some stuffy book. And one of the ones I love is holy shift. Now, can you explain what that is and why it's important to leaders? Holy shift.
exactly that. Sometimes the best thing that can happen for a leader is a holy shift. And the idea being that, you know, it reminds me that the person who wrote the foreword to the book is the coach of the Pittsburgh Pirates. His name is Clint Hurdle. And he said that he's learned over time that there are two types of leaders, those who have been humbled and those who are about to be. And that in the course of any seasoned leader's life, there's an inevitable moment where they are going to have a perplexing situation, often brought upon themselves by their own ego. And that this moment in the book I describe as an ass kick. Certainly it's a butt kick. And the leader that you are before that moment and the leader that you are after that moment, if you're open to the changes and do the hard work that the changes are telling you to do, then you can make this holy shift. And ultimately, the starting position oftentimes early on, and we may not know this, is a lot of times the leader is about themselves. And they've got their sharp elbows of ambition, and they're worried about their climb, and how much more responsibility can I get under my purview, and what is this going to mean for my compensation? And we sort of get caught up in that idea of ourself as leader. And I think the first, yeah, and I think the holy shift happens is we recognize after a while that the first law of leadership is that it's not about me, it's about the people that I'm leading. And after you have this humbling event, again, if you're willing to learn the lesson and get humble from it, you get to the other side and you shift from self-absorption to service. You start looking at the other as being the important. I mean, followers don't need leaders as much as leaders actually need followers to be successful. And that's the holy shift, away from the focus on myself, out of my own ego, and into the other and helping that person be successful.
That's wonderful.
It brings up for me one of the things that I thought about, you know, as I was reading Triggers, and of course I've read Mojo too, and I've read What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I read a little book that you wrote on succession, which is fantastic. I do a bit of succession planning myself. And the thing that can be frustrating for writers like ourselves is that even when we're working with people who know that they should change and know that these changes are going to be good for them and help them be successful, people don't always learn. They're not always willing to make the changes. What is it about? Why don't people do what you teach?
Well, I'm probably the only teacher our listeners have ever listened to who has collected feedback from literally tens of thousands of people who have been in my courses. And I measure, do they do what I teach and do they get better? I wrote an article called Leadership is a Contact Sport. If any of the listeners would like the article, send me an email, Marshall, M-A-R-S-H-A-L-L, at marshallgoldsmith.com. I'll send you a copy of it. 86,000 people around the world are in this research. And in my study, we asked people to do some simple things, like I described, to get feedback. They're humble, they talk about what they improve, they follow up, and we measure, do they get better? Years ago, my biggest client was Johnson & Johnson. They're part of our research study. Wonderful company. I had the privilege of working with Ralph Larson, the CEO, all the way down to leader number 2,000. At the end of my class, I ask a question. Are you going to do what Marshall just taught you? 98%, yes, I'm going to do these things. A year later, 70% did something, and 30% zero, not 1 minute. I talked to the people that did nothing and said, why did you do nothing? The answer had nothing to do with ethics, values, or integrity. They won an award that year. Most ethical company in the world. They're good people. I'm sure your listeners are good people. Had nothing to do with intelligence. They're smart people. I'm sure the listeners are smart people. The reason people did nothing had to do with a dream. Yes, a dream I've had for years. So I'm going to make a prediction. Many of your listeners, in fact, Bill, perhaps even you, have had this dream. The dream sounds like this. I'm incredibly busy right now, given pressures of work and home and new technology that follows me everywhere, and emails and voicemails and global competition. I feel about as busy as I ever have. Sometimes I feel overcommitted. Every now and again, my life feels a little bit out of control. But you know, I'm working on some very unique and special challenges right now. And I think the worst of this is going to be over in about 2 or 3 months. And then I'm going to take 2 or 3 weeks and get organized and spend some time with the family. And I'm going to begin my new Healthy Life program. And after that, everything is going to be different. And it won't be crazy anymore. How many people have ever had a dream that sounds like that? And for how many years? Well, there's not going to be any 2 or 3 weeks. Sanity is not going to prevail. Tomorrow's probably going to be crazier than today. Why don't people do what I teach? It's not because they're mean, bad, evil, or stupid. It's because they're busy. There are a million things going on in our lives right now. And I have learned it is incredibly difficult to keep anything in our head. I pay a woman named Kate to call me on the phone every day. Every day she listens to me read questions I wrote and provide answers I wrote every day. Somebody asked me, why do you pay some woman to call you every day? Don't you know the theory about how to change behavior? I wrote the theory about how to change behavior. I pay a woman to call me every day for the following reason. My name is Marshall Goldsmith. I pay a woman to call me on the phone every day just to listen to me read questions I wrote and provide answers I wrote every day. Why do I do this? I'm too cowardly to do this by myself, and I'm too undisciplined, and I need help. And it's okay. It's okay. We all need help. When we get over this macho nonsense of I have willpower, when I coach people, I say, how many of you have had the same problem for the last 30 years? Or raise their hand. I said, well, then you know what? What are the odds you're going to fix it by yourself next week? You know, repeat after me. My name is Dan. I'm a bad listener. I've not fixed this by myself in 30 years. Who am I kidding? I'm not going to fix this by myself tomorrow. I need help, and it's okay. It's okay. Once we realize it's okay to need help, life is a whole lot better. And, you know, and this relates to another term I love in your book, transformative humiliation. I love that term. Tell us, what do you mean by transformative humiliation?
Well, there is some overlap, too, with concepts and triggers. This idea of sometimes the most transformative, powerful, enduring lessons aren't from our leadership triumphs. They're not from those moments where we're standing on the #1 pinnacle and get to tell everybody we've reached the summit. A lot of times it's those valley experiences that suddenly our ego gets shattered. Nothing seems like it has firm terracotta under our feet. And we are lost and unmoored. And those are the moments that really test us and challenge us. And a lot of times it's through pain. Here's what you said in Triggers about pain that I really loved. You said, the pain that comes with regret should be mandatory, not something to be shooed away like an annoying pet. When we take bad choices and fail ourselves or hurt people we love, we should feel pain. That pain can be motivating, in the best sense, triggering, a reminder that maybe we messed up and can do better. It's one of the most powerful feelings guiding us to change. Likewise, in Leadership Kick in the Ass, I talk about pain as well, saying something similar. And I say, let's see, here we go on page 13, that sometimes pain is often a better teacher than comfort. Why? Because once you've experienced it, you work harder not to experience it again. It's after you fall off the bicycle and scrape your knees that you pedal harder and faster. Pain commits you to making changes and to avoid more pain. So I think that transformative humiliation is the embarrassment that you should feel when you feel those moments that you've done something wrong. Gandhi once said that the truth only hurts if it should. When you're confronted with something truthful about yourself, and you have a conscience, this idea of letting your conscience be your guide, you're feeling regret, you're feeling pain, you're feeling embarrassment, and sometimes humiliation. That big word humiliation is a word that we sort of like to avoid, and yet it's often the gateway to humility. And as you said before, humility is essential for leadership because it's how we start to take the other person more legitimately. We start to listen to their needs and put our egos aside. So a lot of times this idea of transformative humiliation is transformative because it can become the entry point of humility for a sometimes overconfident leader.
Very good. Very good.
Something that you said before about that, people sometimes aren't picking up what you teach them, not because they're bad people, but because they at first haven't sort of had the willingness to say, hey, I need help. Sometimes I think, too, that we bite off more than we should chew, right? We try to change everything all at once, and sometimes even just a small change can have high leverage and make a lot of difference. I remember one time coaching a partner at Accenture, the company that I worked at before I started my own company. And the guy was a brilliant guy, went to a top-tier school, super smart, and at a young age had become a partner. And yet he furrowed his brow pretty much any time he walked down the hallway. And one of the things that it came out in coaching was a high-leverage change for him was a simple, small thing. Just smile more. Smile more when you're with people. Instead of worrying about some big, giant change that's going to be hard to undertake, take something small, and that can sometimes make all the difference. Tell me a little bit about some before and after stories. They're sort of before the trigger, a person acts one way, and then you work with them to make changes as witnessed by the stakeholders that they've made these changes. And then you see sometimes a wholly different person afterwards. Can you help us hang our hat on a before and after story in your work with them, working through their triggers?
I'm going to give you a great story that's not at all about me. It's about someone I coached, Alan Mullally. Now, of all the people I coached, and as you said, I don't get paid if they don't get better, I spent the least amount of time with him than anyone I've ever coached, and he improved the most. The client I spent the most amount of time with didn't improve at all. So I made a chart. I have a degree in mathematics. I made a chart. On one dimension, it was called time spent with Marshall Goldsmith. The other dimension was called improvement. There was a clear negative correlation between spending time with me and getting better. Well, I thought, well, that's a humbling chart. So I go talk to my friend Alan, who improved more than anyone I coach, who was ranked, by the way, #3 leader in the world in 2014, behind only the Pope and Angela Merkel. He was CEO of the Year in the United States. He led the incredible turnaround of Ford. Stock went from $1 to $18.40. He didn't take government money. The guy's not a good leader. He's off the charts, spectacular leader. So I go talk to Alan. I said, Alan, of all the people I've coached, you improved the most. You were great to start with, and I spent the least amount of time with you. I showed Alan my chart. I said, Alan, the way this chart looks, had you never met me, you'd really be good. So what should I learn about coaching from you? And he said, don't make coaching about yourself and your own ego. Back to humility. Make it about the great people you coach, how hard they work and how proud you are of them. Then he said, as a leader, my job isn't that different. Every day I was CEO of Ford, I told myself, leadership is not about me. Leadership is about them. Well, back to your book, leadership's not about me, it's about them. Those lessons totally changed my life. In terms of triggers, it's very important to have the humility to pick up on the environment around us and realize I need to change where I'm headed sometimes if I can listen and learn. In my class, in my book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, I say the biggest problem of all the leaders I ever meet is winning too much. It's important we want to win, and meaningful win, and critical win, and trivial win, and we always want to win. I give an example of, you have a hard day, and you have a hard day and you go home, and your husband and wife or partners there, and they go, I had such a hard day today, I had such a hard day, and we go, you had a hard day, you had a hard day. Do you have any idea what I had to put up with today? Do you think you had a hard day? We're so competitive, we have to prove we are more miserable than people we live with. Give this example in my class at Dartmouth. The young man raised his hand. He goes, I did that last week. I asked him, what happened? He said, my wife looked at me. She said, honey, you just think you've had a hard day. It's not over. Well, I got an email from a gentleman in my class at Dartmouth that really, if any of the listeners today would send me such an email, it would make today a good day for me. He sent me an email and he said, I want to send you an email today and say thank you. He said, yesterday my wife called and was having a terrible day, and I was just getting ready to point out how her problems paled in significance to my own. He said, for some reason I remembered your course and I started breathing and I thought, wait a minute, this is my wife, this is not the enemy, this is someone I love. I just said, I love you, thank you for everything you've done for the family. Then he said, I went home and I spent $25 and I bought her some flowers and I gave her the flowers and I said, I love you. This is the best $25 I've ever spent. Thank you very much. Well, to me, that's the essence of that book is there are always going to be triggers. And you're always going to have an impulse. Typically, there is a trigger, it leads to an impulse, it leads to a behavior. The idea of the book is there is a trigger, there is an impulse, breathe. Become aware of what's going on. And let your awareness drive the behavior, that thoughtfulness, not the impulse. This is very easy to understand in theory. It's very difficult to implement in practice. Very difficult to implement in practice. Now,
you and I, as coaches and working with leaders, and it's such an honor to be able to do that. We do work with sometimes people who have a socially dominant profile. Some people who are addicted to winning, as you said. Or sometimes tend towards to being controlling. And by the way, I fit myself in the controlling category. There are these naturally occurring events that I call a kick in the ass or a face slap in sort of big trigger moments. Short of that, how can we help a leader become more embracing of and courageous enough to experience vulnerability, a high-charging, socially dominant, controlling type, a CEO profile? We don't want to lose that because it gets results, but how do we, short of a face kick or a slap in the face, what can be done to help usher in that humility without them having to go through a major trigger moment?
I think confidential feedback from everyone around you is just a great way to do this. Doug McMillan is now the CEO of Walmart, and I was the coach of his boss, Mike Duke, and I gave feedback to all the top executives, and Doug had a funny comment. He said, my feedback session with Marshall Goldsmith made a root canal feel like a positive moment in my life. Well, it's kind of hard to really look in that mirror and find out what everybody thinks about us, because we all have this delusion. And by the way, every time you get promoted, they laugh at your jokes and they pretend you're smart and everybody sucks up. Well, you can easily get lost. You start believing that nonsense, right? Well, I think it's very important to get confidential feedback that's really honest. Find out what people really think of you. And that way you can engage in preventative medicine. You don't have to wait for a disaster. You can prevent the disaster because you realize I'm perhaps not the God everybody seems to pretend that I am. General Eric Shinseki, a great guy, was head of the U.S. Army, and we had dinner one night, and he was around this group of, new generals, and they were all men. He said they had little stars. He said, men, lately you tell jokes, everybody laughs, you're not that funny. You make comments, everybody writes them down, you're not that smart. Women seem to want to have sex with you if you're not that handsome. They're not laughing at you. They don't think you're that smart. They don't think you're that handsome. It's just that little star. Don't let it go to your head. Well, that's the kind of humility you need. They're not saluting you. They're saluting the star. And the second you think everybody's saluting me, that's when you lose it. That's when arrogance kicked in, ego kicks in, and all of a sudden you're back to me, 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 me. Not so much. Now, Bill, everything we're talking about, every time you get promoted, gets harder and harder and harder to execute. Because every time we get promoted, we get nothing but positive feedback. We get nothing but praise. They're laughing at all those jokes. It's hard to get that humility. You know, I've done 4 programs at my house with retiring CEOs, and they talk about what it's like to let go. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
One of them had a funny story. Said, when did I learn I wasn't the CEO? He said, I got in the back seat of the car and it didn't move. Now, now in your book, you got some funny descriptions of people that I love. Pigheads and weaklings. Tell me what you mean by pigheads and weaklings.
Well, it kind of relates to what we were just talking about there. It's very easy, I think, for a leader to get deluded by the cues that we give them that they're special. We give them a bigger office, they get the parking space, they get a bigger salary, they can come in late to the meeting and nobody confronts them on it, they interrupt people more readily, and they start to act like they're special. And when that happens, when you change from confidence moving into overconfidence or even conceit or arrogance, you run the danger of what I call a pig head. So I think that there's 2 major dysfunctional kinds of leadership. One is self-absorption, where you end up becoming arrogant and stubborn, that you're the one convinced that of your own rightness more than anybody else. I remember working one time doing a keynote, and as I'm getting ready for the keynote, we were going to do a panel, is what it was, a panel of people, and I was one of the panelists, and somebody whispered to me, hey, wait till you see so-and-so. Their ego walks in the room 30 minutes before they do. And sure enough, this person came in and started bragging about how they had just manhandled the board of directors. He said how he liked to hire his own children because he knew that they had the right DNA for the company. And then after we were all done, he gave everybody a copy of his favorite book of quotations, and he was the only person quoted in the book. Now, this is an example of a pig head. It wasn't too long later that he actually got, the company he was with went bankrupt, but he got a big parachute package. So even then he was convinced that he helped the company lose less than it would have had he not been there. So this is the pig head. And it's dangerous because you become diluted into, it goes back to what you had sort of just talked about. It becomes harder the more you go up the chain to have this reality check that when your own ego can get too inflated and get in the way. I think it's really important that a leader should surround themselves with having at least one, what I would call chief ego deflator. You need to have that one person who can get through to you and call you on your own BS when you're starting to get inflated in your sense of self-worth. Now, I contrast that to a leader who their problem isn't self-absorption, but in fact self-neglect, and who constantly defer to other people's opinions, who say yes to some decision over here and then walk in the room where more influential people are and start capitulating to the new idea. People who aren't willing to have any sense of backbone or courage. And these people are, and in fact, I think they're more common. And I call these people weaklings. For instance, I had somebody that I worked with who was a C-level executive who had a person reporting to him who was bucking for his job. The truth was, though, that she alienated everyone around her, and nobody could work with her constructively. And he knew this. And rather than confront this person enough that they would make the changes or even fire this person, he allowed this to go on for so long that it actually not only emboldened her, and she became stronger in her, both her disposition, her pig-headedness, and her capabilities, frankly, but it also undermined his own leadership because people saw him as weak and not being willing to confront something that needed to be confronted. And I think that in a lot of workplaces, more leaders suffer from the weakness than they do the pig-headedness. But those are 2 conditions, the 2 leaders you don't want to be: self-absorbed as a pig-head or self-neglectful as a weakling.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
So, you know, this might be a good space where we could open it up. We got so many people on the call today, so many people that have patched in literally from all over the world. And I know we've got time to hear what's inspired for them. They've just heard Marshall and I talk back and forth and have a dialogue around this idea of humility. And I wonder what questions they might have. So Becky, if you might want to open us up. Becky, are you off mute? I'm not able to hear you.
Thank you, Bill. that all critical step of unmuting before you start to talk. So there have been a ton of great questions coming in throughout the hour, and I'm excited to share those with you. The first one that I have is from Jay, and he's wondering, what do you do when your leader will not listen to feedback from his or her direct reports? And in fact, what do you do when feedback is given and they either downplay or go on the attack?
Okay, I'll take that one if you don't mind, Bill.
Sure, sure.
The great Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker was the founder of modern management. I was privileged to be on his board for 10 years. I got ranked #1 leadership thinker in the world last year. My intellect compared to his is that of a 10-year-old. This guy was so smart. He taught me so many wonderful things. One thing Peter Drucker taught me that Jay needs to learn. Every decision in life is made by the person who has the power to make the decision. Make peace with that. Not a smart person, a right person, a good person, or a fair person. If you need to influence that person, and that person is the decision maker, one word to describe that person, customer. One word to describe you, salesperson. Sell what you can sell. Change what you can change, and make peace with what you cannot change. If you can't sell it and you can't change it, make peace with it. If you don't like to be there, leave. If you have to stay, you got to make the best of it. The reality is, though, decisions are made by decisions. Jay has been looking for logic where none exists and been surprised because you can't find it. Well, decisions aren't made based on logic or fairness or rationality. Decisions are made based on power. Once you understand this dynamic, you're better at influencing people and you're going to be happier. Bill, let me give you a simple example. I'm working with one CEO, and he's the CEO of a private equity company. Private equity, I don't even know what that's like. Well, you know what he says about the private equity firm that owns the company? They can't tell me what to do. I'm the CEO. They can't tell me what to do. Well, the private equity company figures, how much does it cost to get rid of this guy? It cost a couple $1,000,000, take a little time. I said, Marshall, see if you can help the lad. I said his name was Joe. I said, Joe, you're the CEO. Oh, that's good. CEO. You're the owner. Better. Owner is better. And he said, well, they can't tell me what to do. I said, Joe, yes, they can. You see, buddy, it's their money. They can tell you what to do. And, you know, they don't report to you. You report to them. And now I'm going to tell you what to do. And if you do what I tell you, I can probably save you. And if not, you're gone. Well, this guy got so much better, and he was a good guy, but he just let it go to his head. We all have bosses. We all have teachers, bosses, customers, board members. We all have people that have more power than us, and it's not fair. And it's not going to be fair. Make peace. Change what you can change. You're a salesperson. Figure out what they need. Sell to their needs. Change what you can change. If you can change it, change it. If you can sell it, sell it. If you can't change it, you can't sell it, let it go. In my book, Triggers, my favorite line, a favorite chapter in the book says this: before you deal with any topic, am I willing at this time to make the effort required, to make the investment required, to make a positive difference on this topic? Am I willing at this time to make the investment required to make a positive difference on this topic? Our mission is to make a positive difference, not to prove we're smart and not to prove we're right. When you're trying to influence that boss, how can I make a positive difference? How can I do something that's going to move the needle? To the degree you can, do that. The stuff you can't change, make peace. Okay, great question. Becky.
Good.
Thanks. I think this next question, Bill, you might have a point of view about. A friend of ours is wondering how to set boundaries so that humility can't be treated as weakness.
How to set boundaries. Well, I think for one, bring it to consciousness first, right? Think of any leader that you most admire. And typically there's somebody who took an interest in you, who listened a lot to you, who valued your opinions and solicited them, right? So think first about the leaders that you admired. And my hunch is that probably we're a wonderful blend of confidence on the one hand and humility on the other hand. The knowledge that confidence is good. We want leaders to have backbone. We want them to have a solid sense of direction and know where they're going. We want them to give us those same things as well. So we want strength in leadership, but we want it to be anchored to humility. We don't want them to float off into ego land. We want them to never lose sight of their roots and where they came from. We want to make sure that they pull up their bootstraps and put on their breeches the same way that we do too. So first is the conscious recognition of the place for humility. In terms of boundaries, I do think that it is important to have a chief ego deflator, like I mentioned before. In my case, my wife, I'll give you a story from my wife. This is a true story. I came home and I was looking through Training and Development magazine, T&D magazine, and on page 8 there was a picture of me because I was speaking at a conference. I thought, that's pretty cool. Hey, look at that. And then on page 20 there was another picture of me because I was speaking at 2 conferences. So suddenly my head is like, I have arrived. And I went up to the kitchen and I went to my wife and I said, honey, look at page 8 right there. Wait, I'm not done. Look at page 20 right there. And my wife looked at me in that universal look of disgust that only a spouse can give you. And she said to me 5 words, and they really mattered at the time. She said, Bill, go clip your nose hairs. In other words, get over yourself. You're not so important. Get back to the work that you've got to do. And I think that we all need to have somebody around us, because if we can't set our own boundaries of humility, and if we're prone to sort of that sucking up and that people pleasing and getting our ego stake involved, then we got to have somebody that we trust enough and that we cherish enough, that we know that they love us enough that they're not going to lie to us. They're going to be the truth teller. And we have to invite them to be willing to do that. And our response to that has to be inviting of it. We can't get defensive every time that person has to order us constructive feedback. And oh yeah, by the way, my wife is my chief ego deflator, but she's also my chief ego inflator in times where I'm beating myself up. And you need that person too.
That's really helpful. Well, so this is a very important question. When you become aware of your missteps as a leader, so maybe you've had this massive moment of humiliation, what are the best tools to turn that humiliation and pain into humbly leading by example without damaging your character or weakening kind of your stance with those you're leading? So maybe you have some kind of public humiliation. How do you maintain the confidence of those you're leading?
Bill, why don't you do this one?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes up for me is when you have that, the first thing is, look, you're probably going to sulk, okay? So go ahead, have your pity potty, get really your pity party or potty, get sulk, go into your man cave or woman cave, lick your wounds, feel your pain, and get over that part as fast as you can. But it's natural to feel that, that sense of humiliation and embarrassment. What you want to try to do is accelerate through that process. If you've done somebody any wrong in the process, because a lot of times it's your ego involvement that has caused this face slap or butt kick in the first place, you probably owe an apology. There's something hugely disarming about the person who says, the leader who stands up and says, you know what, I was wrong. Not I was wronged, but I was wrong. My bad. I own it. I am sorry, and I'd like your forgiveness. That seems like weakness, but it's actually strength. And it will help other people recognize that you recognize it, and it will help them get over it. And once you say it, it'll allow you to remove those feelings of regret. You know, a lot of times regret hang on you like lead weights internally, and other people may not even know you're carrying them. But once you ask for forgiveness, say you're sorry, make your amends, clean up your side of the street, you lift these little internal lead weights off, and you'll be able to float a little bit lighter on your feet. So those are some immediate things that that come to mind. And then just keep a regimen to make sure that you don't run into yourself again in terms of your own ego.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Bill. So, Marshall, this might be a question for you. You talked a lot about getting confidential feedback from your staff. Are there some tools that you recommend that leaders can use to get that anonymous feedback from their staff?
Well, again, send me an email, marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com. I'll send you how my coaching process works and how I do it. If you like 360 feedback, Number one, many companies have their own versions, which, if you work in a company, I would recommend using what your company uses. On the other hand, if you want a more generic version, I really like Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. They're writing a new, like the 6th edition of the book, The Leadership Challenge. I love the book. Jim Kouzes is a good friend of mine. I was just with him this weekend. They have got research from thousands and thousands of people, a great 360 tool. If any of you are interested, send me an email. I'll just refer you over to Jim Kouzes. I don't know exactly his email address, but I could put you in touch with him. I think it's a great tool to use. And he would, Bill, if he were here, I think agree with pretty much everything we've said.
Yeah, Becky, and to just interject there, the leadership practices inventory, it's a 360 that I use as well. I think it's terrific. If the company didn't sponsor it, if the company doesn't have an internal one, if you're not using the LPI, for example, I did one time I got an email from somebody who was working at the Association for Talent Development, and she sent me an email with 5 questions that she had sent out to other people that she trusted, and along the continuum of people that were strong advocates of her and others that weren't sort of strong advocates of her. And she asked them 5 honest questions about her leadership. Things like, tell me about a time when you've seen me assert leadership in the way that you admired. Tell me about leadership improvement that you think that I should make to make me a better leader. When is the time you saw when I should have demonstrated leadership and didn't? So there are some questions that a person could ask that if they weren't able to do the elaborate 360, which I support and love.
And by the way, I just thought of another one. There's another one. If you're in a global organization, I like this one. It's called the Global Leader of the Future. So I can, again, put you in touch with the people that manage that one as well. I don't do this myself anymore, but I've got access to Jim. It's a good one. That's a good one. There are lots of good ones. So I think the key is just picking something that's pretty good and then getting the input. The important point is not did I ask exactly the right question. The important point is, did I do anything about it? And if you ask even a pretty good question, do something about it, it's going a long way. You ask the best question in the world, you do nothing about it, it's useless.
Hey,
That's
hey,
really
Becky.
helpful. Yeah.
I'd like to drop in with one here too, because it's related. It's this idea of getting feedback, right? And when you have higher trust, if you have a team, you can do this real time with each other. It's delicate, but there's an activity that I call sunshine and shadows. And typically you do it over dinner. Maybe you all have had a glass of wine after dinner, and somebody sits in the hot seat, and everyone goes around the table and says what this person's sunshine is. What is the gift that they may not even be aware that they contribute to the team? Why do we appreciate this person? And everybody makes that appreciation comment about their sunshine. And everybody gets to sit in that seat. We rotate. After we go through everybody at the table, and I wouldn't do it with any more than 12 people, then we have everybody say not what that person's weakness is, but when that person takes that strength and it goes too far and starts having diminishing return or casting a shadow, and that's why we call it sunshine and shadows, what should that person be aware of? What are the triggers? What are the things that we see when the strength has actually gotten too far and now it's starting to cast a shadow? So if you have high trust on a team, and you have the right environment, it can help to have a facilitator, but not always. Sunshine and shadows is a cool way to get that feedback, and it's not anonymous. We have to sort of own it and have the courage to own what we're saying to that person. And it's not a time to zing a person. You're actually telling them their strengths and their overuse of the strength.
It's really helpful, Bill. Thanks. So I've been scanning the questions, and there are far too many for us to get to them all today, but there's a recurring theme that I've seen in the questions, which kind of goes back to a question we already addressed with Marshall. But the question is, well, what do you do when someone thinks they're humble but they're not really? Or what do you do when someone is part of the 30% who won't change? Or what do you do if you can't get your leader to see the importance of others? So it might be helpful just if there is any more wisdom on that topic, because that's the question or type of question that I see repeated in our comments today.
I'll drop in with one. I think that so it's a good question. It's a legitimate question. It's one that a lot of times comes up. Marshall and I have certainly heard this question before. It's that, that if we could just change this other person, that things would be better. And I get it, right? One thing that you could do, is, first of all, tie it to that person's goals. Typically, by the way, we're talking about upward feedback is what it sounds like. Tie it to that person's goals, how that person's behavior is actually slowing the achievement of their goals. Because a lot of times these are really goal-focused, goal-oriented, mission-driven kinds of people. One thing that I coach my coachees to do is during your performance review, when you're sitting down with that boss, say, there's one question I want to ask you, boss. Do you need me to be a yes person? Now, 90%, 95% of the time, that person's going to say, no, I don't need you to be a yes person because that's dangerous to me. And then you say, well, I'll tell you what, I commit that I will not be a yes person for you. That I recognize what you just told me is you don't want me to be a kiss up, you don't want me to be a sycophant, you don't want me to be a yes person. Could you do me a favor? Give me some coaching. When I have to give you feedback that might run counter to what you want to hear, what's the best way to do that to meet with your reception? Because a lot of times people get defensive, right? Yeah. And they'll give you the coaching. They'll say, don't do it when I just come out of the board meeting. Don't give me the feedback when you know I got 50 things in the inbox. Don't give me it in front of the other people on the team as a big surprise and I've never heard this feedback before. So they'll give you the coaching. And then 6 months later, when you actually have to disagree with your boss, take them aside and say, hey, remember that moment where we made the commitment to each other that I wasn't going to be a yes person? Well, the feedback that I have to give you right now is going to honor that commitment. So that's one approach you might try.
Yeah, I've got some suggestion. This is not for corporate people. My guess is that some of the people listening in right now are coaches themselves, executive coaches, life coaches, some form of coach. So I've trained thousands and thousands of coaches. So now I'm going to give you some advice for the coaches, a little bit different than corporate people. As an external coach, to the degree humanly possible, do not take bad business. Now, my mission is to help successful leaders achieve positive, lasting change in behavior. One thing I'm proud of in my book, Triggers, 27 major CEOs endorsed the book. Why am I so proud? 30 years ago, no CEO would admit to even having a coach, much less bragging about it. That's a big change. Well, let me tell you the clients I don't work with. One, I never work with people that don't care. If they don't care, I'm not going to help them. Number two, I don't work with people who've been written off by the company. If they've been written off by the company, they're not going to get saved anyway. This is just a game. It's a waste of time. Number three, I don't work with people that have intellectual or technical problems. A pharmaceutical company called me. Marshall, we want you to coach Dr. X. I said, what's his problem? They said, he's not updated on recent medical technology. Neither am I. Well, I can't make a bad doctor a good doctor, a bad scientist a good scientist. Next, I'm a behavioral coach, not a strategic coach. Vijay Govindarajan, Rita McGrath, they're strategic coaches, not me. Behavioral coaching only solves behavioral problems. If someone is going in the wrong direction, my work only helps them get there faster. I don't turn the wrong direction into the right direction. And then finally, sometimes just the wrong person in the wrong job. My coaching only helps people whose issue is behavioral. They are willing to try and they will be given a fair chance. If those three conditions exist, my coaching process works. If they do not exist, my process doesn't work. As my friend Alan Mullally said, your biggest challenge is pick great customers, you win. To the external coaches listening to me, let me give you my advice. Number one, pick great customers. Number two, to the degree humanly possible, turn away bad business. If they don't care, it's the wrong issue, they're probably not going to get better anyway, and you're going to get blamed for it. So to the degree you can really focus on qualifying your customers and working with great people, you're probably going to have a huge impact. And quit trying to save people who have no interest in being saved. Sometimes in a corporation, maybe you have to do this. If you're an external coach, to the degree possible, remember this. For example, if your name is Jim, my name is Jim, not Jesus Christ. Get out of the savior business. Get out of that savior business and really help people get better. You're probably not going to have a religious experience and make them get better. Well, by the way, the most popular blog I ever wrote on LinkedIn is called If They Don't Care, Don't Waste Your Time. 600,000 people read that blog.
Wow.
We'll have to pull that link up, Marshall, and share it with our attendees today. I want to shift slightly because we really only have time for a brief answer to one more question. And as I was scrolling through, this one really stood out. And Bill, I think this question is for you. One of our listeners shares that he or she has just experienced their own transformative humiliation, getting laid off, and is in the middle of processing that pain. So, what advice or experience or inspiration or hope, and those are my words added, could you share to help this individual work through and get to the other side of that transformative humiliation?
Well, congratulations. Welcome to the club. You've just been initiated in a big, giant butt kick, and it's one that a lot of people in the workforce have felt at some point or another. You can go ahead and sulk a little bit, but now is also the time to, once you're done with the sulking, to clean slate it. This becomes a great moment and opportunity to do things differently and better for the next job that you may go after. Instead of focusing on the wrongness of this, figure out what are the actions that you could take to be the employee, to be the worker, to have a fulfilling career that you'd like to have that's different than the career that you had. When you have enough courage, ask yourself what you may have done to contribute to this. It may not have been you. It could have been the budget, which right now is often the case. But you might ask yourself, what is it that you might have done to contribute to this? Or get honest with yourself and say, you know, really, what was not so fulfilling about that job anyway? A lot of times what's interesting, I find, in working with people who've just gotten laid off is that in the coaching sessions, they've been telling me that they don't even know if they want this job anymore. They're thinking about transitioning. They might be looking at other opportunities outside the company, and then suddenly they get fired, like it's some magical thing. In actuality, they were almost projecting what they kind of knew was going to happen. So that may be the case with this person. I don't know. The good news is this becomes a great clean slate moment, a real opportunity to do things differently and better for the next parts of your career. And in its initiation, it can make you more grounded, more seasoned, more empathetic towards people who may go through a future situation just like this. I don't look through it through the prism of negativity. I look at through the prism of this becomes a great opportunity. It may have opened up a door for you that you cannot see yet. And stay with the process. My hunch is that don't get so desperate that you rush into something because of economic insecurity right now. Process the lessons that you have to get. Do it thoughtfully in terms of the next job that you want. Don't let desperation drive your decisions right now, and you'll come out even better than when you went into the experience.
Great, thanks. Marshall, do you have anything you want to add?
I like that.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for investing this hour with us, and it's just been so thought-provoking and inspiring, and I'm seeing a lot of thanks already in the comments for you, Marshall, and for you, Bill, and for everything that you've added. If we could get to the next slide, I want to share about our very special offer. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, today is the launch day for Bill's latest book, A Leadership Kick in the Ass. And if you buy Bill's book, A Leadership Kick in the Ass, on Amazon, and you use a link that I'm going to forward you in an email, Bill has made a very generous offer that the first 50 of you that do that are going to get a signed copy of Marshall's book, Triggers, today. So look for an email from me very soon that will have the recording link, and you'll not only, when you purchase a copy of Bill's book from any retailer you choose, you'll get a free signed copy paid for by Bill of Triggers, and they're signed. I saw, in fact, I've already bought your book, Bill, but I want to keep a copy of Triggers. I might go buy another one just so I can keep one.
Good
And
idea.
not only that, but today, if you do that, I have an even bigger deal for you. And we already moved to the bigger deal. Did we move to the bigger deal? I can't see the slides. The bigger deal is that if you buy Bill's book on Amazon or your favorite online retailer, I will send you Triggers, but I will also send you a paperback of Bill's most recent book before this one, Leaders Open Doors. So when you buy one, you're going to get 2 books today for the first 50 people. And we'd love to be able to share that as a gift. $17 for one book, but you're going to get 3. And if you add it all up, it's like 3 for the price of 1, which is absolutely amazing. However, I cannot do this if you are out of the United States, and I apologize to all of our international listeners. If you're an international caller and you are online and want to get a bonus, we'll create a special bonus just for you that we can send digitally, and I'll let you know about that as well. And I apologize, I should have said that at the outset. But if you are in the US and you order Bill's book today on Amazon, then you'll get all 3 books while supplies last. We only have 50 signed copies, and I might claim one for myself if I can do it fast enough. So it's a really fun day. It's such a great day, Bill, to bring your book into the world, and it's a thrill and an honor to support you through the journey. Thanks to you both.
Well, let me just drop in and say thank you, first of all, to Marshall Goldsmith. What a treat to have him on today's webinar. I'm so thankful that you're here. Thank you, Becky, as always, for all the good work that you do. All the people that are on today's webinar, thank you. Today is also Martin Luther King Day. Martin Luther King said that everyone can lead because anyone can serve. And I hope that you take the things that you heard today and apply them to your own leadership in a way that benefits others. So thank all of you.
Thank you.